Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name's Matt.
And my name is Jadrian.
And we are excited to be back again for the fourth episode in a row at the Pour Tap House in Midtown Atlanta on Peachtree Street. They're hosting us. It's been a fun afternoon for us, and you have had the joy, the listeners' joy. Hopefully it's been a joy. If you're listening, it's got to be a joy. You have had the joy of hearing us here for now about a month and a half, but this will be the last of the four. But we are excited to have Austin with us. Austin, would you mind introducing yourself for the audience?
Absolutely. So I am Austin Green. I teach AP Microeconomics and AP Macroeconomics here in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you.
I teach AP Micro, AP Macro at Milton High School. I work for College Board and score the AP exam. I work for the Foundation for Teaching Economics. Really, I just do a lot with econ right now.
No, and we love it, and that's part of why we asked you here. Is a recent winner of the Teacher of the Year by the Georgia Council of Economic Education. So super big congrats, and we know those aren't accidents. So thank you for everything you did to earn that award, because I'm sure it was some pretty amazing stuff. And before we get to that, the important discussions of what are you drinking? So I'll pass it over to Jadrian.
So I am on my last beer of our recording session, finally. I have a Wild Heaven brewing company. It is called a Garden Beer number 15, so one more sour is how I'm ending it. One of the things I've really liked about Atlanta so far is there's been an incredible number of sour beers, and I feel like I don't have to just drink IPAs over and over.
That would be terrible, but no. But they also have a lot of IPAs, so for the audience, you didn't have to worry about me. So Austin, what do you have there?
All right, so I am not drinking alcohol for 75 days, which was a terrible timing thing, but I've got a pina colada mocktail, which is pretty delicious, but I missed the sour. So keep enjoying those, Jadrian.
And I, for all the others, I've been doing the local. This is about as what in the world are you doing drink choice as you could get. I'm having a Brooklyn Lager in Atlanta. I've never actually had the Brooklyn Lager, so I have tried probably a dozen local beers. So for the Atlanta breweries, trust me, I've had a lot of them. They've been delicious. This is just a chance to try something different. So, cheers. So, why don't we? So you we mentioned the Teacher of the Year award and won that recently. I'm sure to have earned that, right? There's some pretty cool and innovative things that you've done with your students. Do you mind sharing one or two highlights of kind of your favorite things that you do with students?
So I think the AP curriculum kind of gets into the route of lecture. And we've all been doing econ long enough to know that there are better ways to do econ. And so I do a ton of activities. I think some of my favorite, I'll go with my favorite because we hit it pretty early on in the semester, is I do the Twinkie Eating Challenge to get them to think about diminishing marginal utility. And I've recently, I think I'm in my second year of doing it, I love getting them to sing karaoke to learn about supply. And I thought this was going to cost me a lot of money. I have made money off of this. High school students will pay me to sing, which is such a fun conversation to have with them. And I think I love this because it gets them hooked into it really, really fast.
Yeah, I have done the karaoke one. I haven't done the other. I think, Jadrian, you've done the other one. So the karaoke challenge, the way, I don't know if the iteration I'll describe is probably similar, but I have everybody stand up at first. And I start to say, you're coming up, and I'll usually give two songs. So the two songs that I'll give for the options are the theme song for The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Old Town Road. So they all know that, and it's all somewhat easy. Those are the two that I've done. And then you start with a high price, and you say, this is real. We're going to pay the winner here. But naturally, I'm going to pay the person who wants to is going to do it for the lowest amount. And once I name a price and you are like, I no longer am willing to do this, then you can sit. So I'll start off at $10,000 and pretty much nobody sits. And then 1,000 and a couple people will sit. I'm like, no. And there are people who are that terrified. And then 100 and then 50 and then 10. And So you literally get to negative numbers.
Yeah, I've gotten to, I think, negative $2 at one point, which is like the kids start to think, I'm like, yo, what does that mean? It's like, well, I'm paying you. And I'm like, exactly. This is real. Pony up the money. Let's do it.
Yeah. And and it really illustrates the supply.
Yeah.
Because you're asking for some people to provide something, but they would need to be paid. More people are willing to supply at a higher price.
Matt, I'm curious, only because you started at such a high number. And I need you you don't have to answer. I won't pass the mic back to ask you, but you can nod and I'll give the answer for you. Do you really start at 10,000? Do you actually go, okay, he says yes.
Yeah.
How big are your classes?
35.
35.
Now, I would reserve the right to be the one who sings if it's
Okay, so okay. That's gonna be. Let me add because I'm sitting in front of the mic. So he said that if the price is too high, that he reserves the right to sing and essentially, I guess, at a lower price, and you'll pay yourself. Theory wise, you'll pay yourself.
Exchange, yeah.
The reason I brought it up and I wanted to ask you is because. Could your students not just collude? This is why Austin's like, I would never offer that amount of money. They would collude immediately. That 20 of them would go, everybody else sit down, I'll share with you, and then take that money from you. That's why I wanted to check and see how I would be terrified to offer that amount of money. I have gotten 0. I have never gotten negative.
Okay. And then the eating competition. I don't know if either of you want to describe exactly how that works. I think you've done it with Twinkies. You do it. Is it like ho-hos, Swiss cake rolls?
So I've done it with donuts too. So there's a different. Don't ever do it with Kroger donuts. Pro tip: Krispy Kreme works great. I had to cut a kid off because I never buy enough. I only buy for 4 sections, and I have 5 sections. And in my second to last class, the kid went through 12 donuts, and I was grossed out. I was disgusted by it, and he paid for it later. He ran track for our school, and he had practice afterwards, and I heard it was a miserable practice for him. But yeah, so Jadrian, I don't know how you do it. I give him 2 minutes, and it's when I do the Twinkies, it's just if you can get through the whole box, I'll give everyone in the class 2 bonus points on their next quiz, and it is hilarious and disgusting to watch, and thankfully there's never been a reverse effect yet.
Yeah. And the idea here is the first Twinkie is wonderful, but when you move on a little bit, it's not as exciting. Jadrian, how is yours similar on that?
Yeah, so I do Swiss cake rolls. Mine is 3. I give them 3 minutes. I do not allow water. That is I have found that helps avoid the reversal. Mixing water and food is usually not good. Yeah. So I give them 3 minutes for a whole box, but a whole box has 12 in it. Nice, easy way to keep track, keep count, because I can count the little white squares. But part of the perk is exactly what you said. You can see it. Like the first one they eat, they're smiling, happy, jumping around. And by the time there's 30 seconds left there, you can see them sort of look at it and stare at it and go, do I really want this? Yeah. And usually the answer is no. Never had a reversal. But one of the things that when you brought up the Krispy Kreme example, this is really important because people have asked me, like, why don't you do other foods? Part of it is I don't want them to eat fast. I need there to be, I need it to slow them down. Mm-hmm. Swiss cake rolls do a really good job of that because if you've never had one, they have this sort of waxy, chocolatey coating to it. Because I don't let them have water, it slows them down tremendously because they can't do it. Yeah. But the most important thing is I need it to not be a choking hazard. And a Swiss cake roll or a donut is going to, if that does get stuck, they can swallow that. I have heard of people doing like Reese's cups and M&Ms, and I'm like, that sounds dangerous. Like that is beyond dangerous to me. I can see you choking on that, so I don't do that one.
Yeah. This, it's been a long time since I've had a Swiss cake roll. The thought as a kid, I loved them. I can't even imagine. They sound horrible now to me.
Good. So good.
So good. Okay. That's
when it's
different
when
taste. When it's one. So you mentioned AP, the AP grading, AP. You teach the AP, and you teach exclusively the AP classes right now. You're approaching an AP class. Obviously, these are the high school students who are good enough to get to the point where they're going to take the AP class. What are maybe the general strategies you have approaching that class? We know you obviously throw in some of the cool interactive things that help people learn better, but what's some of the approaches you take for?
Yeah, econ has always gotten that bad rap of like being that class that just it's the dismal science, right? Like we all have that book where it describes it that way. So I think my go-to strategy all the time is every lesson, it's here's where you see this in the real world. Because if I can get them to grab onto that idea, they're going to go home and share with mom and dad like, oh, hey, we did this activity where we were eating Swiss rolls or singing karaoke songs or whatnot. And that explains why when you want me to mow the lawn for free, I don't want to do it. And that sparks... and I tell the parents up front, like, kids are not going to come home and talk to you about their Calc BC class. Like, they're just not.
No.
At least I hope not. But with an econ class, they're getting that opportunity every time to go in. And so that's really always my mentality with every single day that I'm going in. It's like, what is it that you can see this in a day-to-day, everyday life?
No, that's fantastic, and really, I mean, that doesn't sound that different necessarily than maybe the way we would approach it at the college level, which I guess if AP counts for college credits, is part of what we would think here.
So Austin, I have a question for you, and I think our teachers out there know this, and maybe some of our college professors know this, but I think a general listener might not know this. So what Matt said, you do well on an AP exam, depending on the university, what score you get college credit for it. But Austin and I have had this conversation before. The stuff that's covered in an AP test is not what I cover in my principal's course. The College Board does a really good job of making sure that students are prepared for a wide variety of principal's courses. And so while I don't teach that material, universities largely in their partnerships with the College Board have said these are important materials. But what I'm curious from you is part of the reason I don't teach some of those subjects is they're challenging, right? Like I'll tell you exactly what it is off the top. I teach it in my upper level course. I do not teach it in principals. I do not teach monopsonies. I do not teach the factor markets in my principals course. That is, in my opinion, incredibly hard to understand. And I am so focused on getting them through market structures. So I guess I'll have a couple questions for you, but generally, given all the stuff that's in an AP course, what do you find challenging to teach? Whether that's not having an activity, whether it's student motivation with that topic, timing of where it falls in the course, what concept do you think you find that frustrates you because you don't feel like you do as well on it as you could?
You've already said it.
Wow.
Okay, so I like teaching labor markets in terms of teaching the supply of labor. Like, I think that's super practical for kids to think about, like, how is my job, like, my skill set, how is that impacted? I hate teaching anything else with labor markets. A friend of mine will always get a phone call from me, and there's always that time in the year. It's like right after Thanksgiving break, and he knows that I'm calling to go, tell me about factor markets once again. Luckily for me, that's really at the end of the curriculum for College Board. So my philosophy with the College Board curriculum, because it is so much, is if I can teach them all through the market structures really well, and I've given them all those analytical skills, they can navigate their way through supply and demand for labor. They can navigate their way through externalities. Maybe not super great, but enough to get them to a 3. Also, I teach micro in the fall, so in the back of my mind, I sit and think, they're not going to remember this when the AP exam rolls around in May. So that's also where I kind of fall back on, is like, if I don't do a great job on that, I'm not super concerned. In macro, it's international trade. I never feel like I do international trade well. And I almost always only have, if I'm lucky, 5 days to teach international trade. And sometimes that gets really hard.
No, it's kind of funny. The two of my favorite things to teach in macro, international trade is probably my single favorite. That's kind of funny, but different people, different things. And one of my favorite things to teach, actually, I love teaching about the backward bending labor supply curve. That's to me one of the most fun and interesting, and kind of relates to it. But it's always kind of interesting to hear different areas, different struggles. So the students. The AP, you could take the class and you get a grade in the class, and then, at least I know in a lot of Pennsylvania districts, you don't have to take the national exam. That's the same? That's the same with you?
Yeah. So my school district pays for everybody to take the AP exam,
Okay.
which gets into fun incentives on that side. But for the most part, like normally I have between 125, 145 students who take my class. 95, 96% will take the exam, and
Right.
will do great on it.
That's good. And so, It's one of those. If 95% are taking it, I was going to say, like, is the goal when you're teaching it so that they can be successful in the exam? And I think you've kind of answered that question.
So I'm gonna have a follow up because I think this explains stuff that I've now seen on your Twitter account before. I had never processed this idea that a student would take the micro AP class in the fall and then have to wait 5 months to then sit and take the exam. And we've talked before about learning and how to. At this particular conference that we're at is about a lot of the sessions are about how do you measure learning, how do we make sure students learn, and I could not imagine like if my principles course was we take it in the fall and then come back in May and you take the final exam. I have a feeling it would be a disaster. Do you find? I mean, you're a great teacher, right? You're Georgia Teacher of the Year for a reason, right? Like, you're not going to brag about yourself, but we will. You're a great teacher. I'm going to assume your macro pass rate is much higher than your micro pass rate. Okay. Are you willing to share how? I think you've shared it on Twitter. That's why I'm asking. Are you willing to share the difference?
The difference in
Percentage with three. Three is like sort of your metric, right?
yeah. So, overwhelmingly, macro, my scores are always significantly higher. More specifically, so with the AP exam, 3 is kind of like the lowest pass, and then 4, 5 are the upper ranges. So most of my students will land in the 4, 5 range. Handful of 3s. Micro, that is always the challenge is getting them to come back and review and having them sacrifice 4 days after school to review. My percentages still in micro on pass are upper 80%. So there's still a little bit of a challenge there, but it's one of those. We've brought it to College Board's attention a lot. Like that same idea is like there's no college class where you take the college class, like you said, Jadrian, and you take the final exam 5 months later. And we've never gotten an answer from College Board that has been super satisfactory.
So speaking of College Board and scoring the exams, by the time our listeners are enjoying the podcast, you will have been there and graded. But from when we're recording this, you're going to get on a plane in a couple days and go grade. Tell us a little about the process. Like, how long is this? Is this what does it involve? Are you grading a whole exam? Are you given one specific question? I'm just kind of curious. I know that there's this group that gets together and they grade, but I really don't know anything about how it works. So I'd love if you could share with us that.
Sure. So I'll first start with the econ reading is the best reading because like we're doing right now.
Well, it's economics.
Exactly. And like we're doing right now, our day always ends somewhere at a brewery, a winery. We are the fun group that people wish they were with. I will fly up on Sunday and the reading will start on Monday. And so kind of the general overview is you're going to get assigned to a specific question. And you're going to be in a specific area, and everyone in that area is scoring that question. So last summer, I scored only question 1. And for the entire reading, it was Form A, question 1, and for an entire week, 6-7 days, I don't remember exactly how many days it was, we just looked at question 1.
I'm going to pop in for just a second. I'm going to interrupt Austin here, because I want you to think about what he just said, that he scores the exact same question all day long. For 6 days. And he started this podcast by telling you that his favorite thing to do to students is to make them eat 12 donuts in 2 minutes. That he enjoys the diminishing returns aspect of putting his students through torture, and then yet he tortures himself with the same question. I don't like grading my own students. So I guess I'll follow up. How do you overcome diminishing returns in a case like that? How many students do you think you grade individually?
There's a lot of Red Bull. That's how we try and prevent that. A lot of Alanis, a lot of caffeine. Especially once midweek hits. How many do you grade in a day? So it depends on the question, because like question 1 is always the longest question. Question 2 and 3 on the exam are medium and shorter length. So last year I was on question 1, and I wish I could remember how many I was grading in a day. It seems like more than it probably actually was. But yeah, it sets in actually pretty quick. And then it set in when you're actually dreaming and having dreams about like what did Paula or whoever's thrown in the question, what did she do? I will at least thank the students, because if they don't know anything about the exam, they'll at least break it up for us and throw in something fun, a presidential hot or not list, Taylor Swift lyrics, cookie recipes. They get really creative, and it kind of breaks it up for us too. So
Yeah. Kudos to you and to everybody who grades on the AP exam. I've often thought I've heard the joke. I do, that I would teach for free, but they pay me to grade, and this is wow. Do you mind giving an example? I don't know if you're allowed to say this, so if you're not, don't. But you said question one's long. What would be an example of what question one might be on a typical AP exam?
Yeah, no. I mean, all of the AP questions are posted after. So in macro, a question one is usually going to start with some issue. Your economy's in a recession or inflation, or it might start at full employment, and then something happens and it enters into recession. And then we're going to get kids to calculate. We might ask kids, what fiscal policy to correct this. Calculate a spending multiplier, calculate a tax multiplier, and how much in spending or taxing should Congress do. And then we usually will go one step further and we'll ask them to deal with monetary policy in there. And then if we really want to have fun with them, we'll also throw in one international trade question that kind of gets right into that. So we'll usually get students to go through about 3 of College Board's, what we call CEDs, the exam description. We'll usually get students to tackle 3 of those in that first question. Okay. It's a lot. Yep. It is a lot.
So I know some people who have they do not write the questions, right? But they are table leader. They've worked their way up to higher level grading. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can say no and I'll immediately pass it to you, is that you all basically sit around the table. Let's say you're question one. You're a bunch of question one people around a table, but there's multiple tables of question one readers, and then somebody at the table is sort of in charge of the table. So if you get something that you're stuck on, you go to your table reader. If they don't feel comfortable, they go to the other table leaders. There's sort of a pyramid. Is that right? Okay, good. Yeah. Fantastic. So the reason I bring that up is I want to make sure that anybody listening, if you have a student who's in AP class, or if you're an AP student yourself, these questions are very well written because there are thousands and thousands of students taking this. They are not poorly worded questions. These are very well worded questions. And so if you're a college teacher, as Austin said, the AP exams are online. Yeah. You can go get an AP exam and you can grab one of those questions out there. I challenge you to take one of those questions and give it to your students and watch how well your students do on that question, because I have, and they don't do well. What I taught, they did not do well on mine. And a lot of them came back and goes, oh, that question was really confusing. And I go, that's actually probably the best written question on my whole exam, because I didn't write that one.
No, not only I think are the questions good, but I think you hear the process. I think you could be comfortable. Look, if you took it and you got a 2 or a 3, and it's sad and depressing, and you're like, you wish you did better. It's probably not the scorer's fault, right? I mean, the scores are, in terms of the design, it's about as great of a grading design as you could possibly imagine, because one person there's audit checks to make sure that the reader makes sure all of their people are doing it about the same, and because you're only grading one, you've got that consistency over time. So no, that's fantastic. We're just about to the pop culture time. Any other questions, Jadrian?
So I'm actually mad at Austin for this, because I'm going to put Austin on the spot here.
Let me take a drink.
Austin was named Georgia Teacher of the Year, and he did not even talk about his incredible project that he did in his macro course that is published in a peer-reviewed journal. And so we talked last time with Chris Cannon from the Georgia Council about incentives for teachers and the challenge of getting them to show up to workshops. There's literally to my knowledge, you could correct me if I'm wrong, there's no real fiscal payment for you publishing. That was your just pure interest and enjoyment and wanting to share that knowledge. And so I would be remiss if I did not ask you to talk about your peer-reviewed publication in the Journal of Economics Teaching, because I think it's a fascinating thing that you do with your students, and I think other people should hear it, and I'd love to share it with other people who are listening to the podcast.
Well, I give you credit, because I would not have ever thought to have published it. So I was up for Teacher of the Year for the high school, and I wanted to come in with a fresh lesson, and so I found a lesson on Econ EdLink, which is a great resource for teachers, college professors too. And I looked at the lesson, and I just did not care for the lesson that I saw, and I liked kind of just like the basic bones of it though. And so I sat down and rewrote it. And basically the idea of it is a simulation where students are put in the position of being the Presidential Council of Economic Advisors in the midst of a pandemic. And they are tasked with looking at 6 different fiscal policy options. Pretty much it was just pieces of the CARES Act. And pretty much having to go through the idea of looking at, is this policy timed? Is it effective? What lags are there? So kind of getting them to think through the challenges of fiscal policy, and then evaluating those proposals, and then having to crash land on like, hey, this is the policy that we propose. What's really interesting about it is, at least this last group who graduated, I think they were 8th graders when the pandemic happened, and really most students, I don't know if you guys experienced this in your class, they just know the stimulus payments. That's just what they go with. They don't think about all the other fiscal policy options that were out there. And so when I kind of crash landed, and like, all of these made it into the CARES Act, they just go, wait, that made it in there? What is meals deduction? Like, how is this useful? And so it's a great activity for them. It kind of breaks up, I know, fiscal policy. There's not a ton of great simulations out there for it. And it's one of those I'm willing to sacrifice a day to keep them engaged and keep them bought into the course as a whole, and let them go home and see it all.
Yeah. No, and it's cool, and kudos. There isn't the incentive, so to do that and it's amazing. It's an amazing service to this profession to take the time to do that when there's zero monetary reward on doing that and contributing a great paper. It's a nice shout out for the teachers listening. Journal of Economics Teaching has lots of this lesson, which we'll link to in the description, but also a lot of other great lessons for everybody here.
He should start pop culture, because he has another paper he's going to tell you.
Okay, we're gonna pop culture. Austin, go.
I'm so great you just teed that one up, because I was really struggling on the pop culture side for this one. Okay, so the go-to pop culture is always Taylor Swift right now. Like, you just can't go wrong. I actually worked with, Wayne Geerling and Dirk Mateer and a couple other people. And we co-authored a paper in the Journal for Economic Education coming soon on the economics of Taylor Swift. It's called Swiftonomics. So we've got a couple different lessons in there. I think my favorite one in there is international trade and Taylor Swift, which, interestingly, I said it wasn't my favorite topic to teach, which is kind of gets my students bought in, like, oh, we can look at exchange rates with Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. So that's gonna be my pop culture go-to.
You do Taylor. You skipped last time, so I'm skipping this time. You do Taylor. Okay. Give me a Taylor Swift one.
I wasn't gonna do it. I could do a Taylor Swift. I was jumping to. I was gonna look for one from Game of Thrones, because when this is coming out, it's a couple weeks before the House of the Dragon season 2 drops as we record, but we'll be in the middle of season 2 of House of the Dragon. I'll go with one that's kind of a little bit basic, but definitely is on the AP exam. I think it would be on the AP exam. But a clip on positive versus normative statements. And I'm getting the nod, so I'm glad it is on the AP exam. If it wasn't, I would have been a little concerned. But there's actually a really good clip, and we'll put it in the description, and it's on website econthrones.com, where Tyrion actually does a nice discussion. Like, a leader is talking about how you had to have kind of this brutality of the leaders to keep everybody in line. That's the way it always has been, or it won't work. And Tyrion's like, well, what is versus what ought to be is an interesting consideration, which is the exact thing you would say in terms of the difference between positive and normative economics. So those on the screen who've been seeing me look at the phone, I was like trying to say, which Game of Thrones clip am I going to talk about right now as I came up? But I enjoy, it's a good one for those watching. I'm doing a series now, so I'll do the shameless shout out on YouTube. I say now. 2 weeks from now, the first one will come out. But during the season, every week there will be an episode discussing some lessons of either Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. that you could watch, and you could also find the clips then to easily access. So, Jadrian, you're sure no pop culture here today?
I'm good.
Any final words of wisdom you want to share with the audience, though, Austin, before we go?
Final words of wisdom, man.
It's almost back to school time. So think about it.
When this hits, this is almost back to school
it's
time.
almost back to school time.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'll just throw out my favorite quote then. I think that's where I'm going to land. Put first things first and you get second things thrown in. Put second things first and you get neither the first or second. So as you jump into the school year, like, ask yourself, what are your first things when you jump into that classroom again?
It's a fantastic quote.
It is.
I had not heard that quote before. So
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being here today, and thank you for everybody for listening, and thank you again, Pour Taproom, for this series of episodes.
Yeah.
And until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.